long-term implications of President Biden's executive order for the review of critical supply chains. I'm joined by Kamala Raman. She is Senior Director Analyst with Gartner. Hello, Kamala.
Hi, Robert. Pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you for being with me. So this is a very important thing to come from the White House. I'm not sure that the presidential level has ever referred to supply chains ever before with this detail, if at all. Give me a brief rundown of the Biden executive order. What exactly is he calling for here?
With the executive order, the president is really highlighting that the supply chain the backbone of a successfully functioning economy and not just a back office function. So, given that we've seen a lot of manufacturing over the last few decades, it's nothing new, moved overseas, I think President Biden is really looking to see how we can secure supply chain capabilities that are needed to provide goods and services within the US for domestic markets. And four specific industries have been identified as a starting point. There's a 100-day evaluation followed by a detailed report that will be issued after 1 year.
I see. So we're talking about four chief areas. We're talking about semiconductors, large capacity batteries, pharmaceuticals, and rare earth elements. Are these all areas where we have seen problems, these critical supply chains? Have they been in trouble? Have there been shortages? And if so, why?
Absolutely. For different reasons, right? We've all heard about the automotive industry's challenges with not getting semiconductors and therefore really even having to shut down lines. We've seen in the throes of the pandemic some nationalism that has been seen in the pharmaceuticals industry in terms of what goods or medicines are produced in which parts of the world. Batteries with the huge jump of interest in electric vehicles, batteries are definitely a big challenge. And rare earths, by definition, they are only mined in certain parts of the world. So there is naturally a lot of concentration in terms of where these products come from. And once again, when you look at batteries, electric vehicles, rare earths are a very important commodity. So
Yeah.
yeah, you could ask whether these are the only four or the right four, but I think these four industries have been chosen because we can't really dilute the effect of an analysis by doing it across all industries. So the administration has rightly picked a few industries to focus on. And as we just discussed, these are all industries that have had unique challenges.
Given the pandemic, we might have expected there to be issues in the pharmaceutical supply chain. Batteries, yeah, that makes sense because of the growth in electric vehicles. Rare earth, that's been a challenge for years and years, and I know a couple of companies are trying to wrest control of that away from China. Semiconductors, though, the sudden shortage, maybe it isn't so sudden, but it felt sudden. That comes as a bit of a surprise. Do you understand how we got into this state of affairs with a shortage of semiconductors?
The semiconductors, specifically, two different things are happening with it, right? The one is that back last March, when the pandemic started, there was a sudden crash in demand. So supply lines were shut down. We all operate in a just-in-time world for the most part. So capacity was dialed down. And when the demand picked up again, it is taking a while to ramp supplies back up. And of course, these days, semiconductor chips are in every imaginable product. So that's part of the problem, that whole demand and supply misalignment. But there's a broader theme beyond that too. As we've seen for the last several years with the US-China trade war, right? Technology is definitely a flashpoint in this trade war. China has a lot of concentration of manufacturing components, but China is also aggressively looking to become more self-sufficient with their capabilities in semiconductor manufacturing. The higher up you go with, the more sophisticated 10 nanometer and smaller semiconductor chips, there's a lot of concentration in the world in terms of where the supply comes from. So given that, a lot of semiconductor manufacturing, or those fabs, as you call it, have moved away from the US, and the center of gravity is definitely in Asia. Taiwan is a big center. I think the administration is really looking to see how can we bring back some of those critical capabilities back to the US, and that's probably why semiconductors is on the list.
Yeah. Which of those four do you think might pose the greatest challenge in terms of achieving the goals that President Biden is out to do?
Robert, at this stage, it's really hard to say which of these will be successful quickly or not. As a supply chain professional, when I look at this, I'm thinking there are private sector companies involved in each and every one of these industries. Every company is interested in being resilient and diversified to meet their markets around the world, right? Like whether they are an American headquartered company or a Chinese company or headquartered elsewhere in the world, they all want to serve multiple markets. So it remains to be seen how companies will respond to this. Will there be incentives in the form of policies or actual monetary incentives that the government is putting out in order to encourage companies to expand or even bring back capabilities that don't exist in the US? And there are different challenges for each of these industries. Pharmaceuticals, for example, very regulation heavy industry, right? So they will not really make changes to manufacturing footprints very quickly because it often takes years to get approvals for changes that are being made. Semiconductors, new fabs take billions of dollars to set up.
Yeah.
And not just that, you're looking at, not just money, but you're also looking at technologies, right? Who has the newest technologies for each of these industries? Are those companies invested in coming back to the US or bringing capabilities to the US for the first time? And even if they are interested, how long will that take? And last but not least, do we have the skilled talent pool in this country to be able to absorb a lot of new capabilities? So those are some of the biggest questions that are on the minds of my colleagues and myself as we look to see what is going to happen in the first 100 days and then in the first year as the
Yeah.
administration comes up with some directives.
And when we're thinking about rare earth technology, that is a supply chain that will have to be almost rebuilt from scratch. I mean, I know that there are aspects of that are being produced in the United States, but not the entire supply chain, which continues to be very much dominated by China. That seems like a huge task.
Yes. And some of this might end up, right, with, coalitions of allied countries. Look,
Mm.
as much as the US and China each want to be dominant, we all know that we need each other, right? You may have the most sophisticated manufacturing capabilities if you're China, but you need the markets that the rest of the world provides. And likewise, the US may have a lot of technological superiority, but we need the markets the rest of the world provides. We also need some low cost countries or countries with these capabilities. So I think what we're going to see is not just what capabilities will come back to the US, but also how the US can align, because the Biden administration says it's committed to multilateralism again. So we're going to see who are some of these partner countries that the US will work with to say, I'm going to secure my supply chains, but that doesn't mean all of these capabilities have to rest within my shores. Who are some other countries that I can ally with, either for low cost labor or for raw materials that that country might be mining? And I think we'll be seeing a lot more along those terms as well. It's not just in terms of what comes back to the US.
What should the private sector be doing? It seems that at this point they can do little other than stand by and wait for the results of the review before they take any kind of action. But what role do you think they might potentially play? I imagine it has to be pretty substantial.
The private sector is where all of the industry is. So
Yeah.
if I were in one of these companies, number one, I would be looking, and I think a lot of companies are already doing this to see what does my network look like in terms of my own manufacturing capabilities, my key suppliers, and where they're sourcing from. I was speaking with a multinational organization recently, and they were saying, given the challenges of the pandemic, they're really committed to not just outsourcing manufacturing capability, but having in house factories. And they're looking to their suppliers also to say, which of you have control over your own manufacturing capabilities so that you can support me when my demand goes up or down? So companies should really be looking to say, where do I have manufacturing capabilities? Who are my key suppliers? What sorts of exposure do I have to certain specific parts of the world? The second piece that we're seeing is companies in this last year are really taking a good look at cost efficiency and saying, am I sacrificing too much resilience or diversification by focusing on cost efficiency? And definitely leading companies are looking at what can we be doing to be more diversified, to have two or three manufacturing locations for the world. So if, for example, there are some incentives the Biden administration puts in front of organizations to bring capabilities either to the US or allied countries. Companies might look at this to say, what can I do to secure my American markets while not giving up on markets in other parts of the world? So they may be looking to see whether they will be moving certain supplies or capabilities to the US or allied countries, or will they be looking to have two or more supply chains, because that could also be one way in which they protect themselves in cases of disruptions, as
Hmm.
we've seen in this last year. So those
And
are some of
yeah,
the key activities companies should be looking at.
and perhaps rethinking their just-in-time strategies to the extent that they minimized inventory and buffer stock so much that they didn't have anything to draw on when the manufacturing supply dried up so temporarily. So you think they might be rethinking that strategy as well?
Absolutely. I think, as we looked at resilience activities last year, my colleagues and I published a couple of different reports. Buffer capacity or inventory is definitely one of those. And
Mhm.
having a multitude of sites, not just each site for local needs, but being able to move production from one site to another. And we at Gartner have the supply chain top 25 rankings that we produce every year. And as part of that, as we've been briefed by companies, we're hearing time and again from multiple organizations about how they are looking at this trade-off between cost efficiency and resilience, because let's face it, if you're not able to respond in an agile manner to demand drops or spikes, you are not just losing that business at that time, you might lose certain customers altogether. So companies are looking at investments in resilience as an insurance to protect streams of revenue, which may be orders of magnitude larger than the investment itself. So definitely you look at resilience investments.
Yeah, so many issues attached to this executive order, and it's going to be really interesting to see the response to them when they finally get around to the 100 days is over and we understand where action might be taking place. But Kamala Raman, thanks very much for helping us to clarify just what this order is all about and what might be the issue, what might be its impact going down the line long term. Thank you very much for
Thank you,
being with
Robert.
me. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Take care. Bye.